In the rolling hills of Tuscany, where vineyards stretch endlessly and the air carries the scent of olive trees, a nightmare lurked behind the serene beauty. For decades, whispers of a shadowy figure have haunted the quiet villages around Florence. Figure so terrifying that it earned the chilling name, the Monster of Florence. Tonight, we revisit the gruesome tale that shook Italy. A series of murders so sinister that even seasoned detectives were left baffled, searching for answers that might never come. From lovers attacked in the dead of night to clues that led nowhere, this story is a labyrinth of horror, deception, and unspeakable violence. The victims, young couples who sought love under the stars, became prey to a predator whose cunning knew no bounds. Each attack followed a macabre pattern, each crime scene more chilling than the last. And while the police tried to piece together, the mystery fear seeped into every corner of Florence. Families locked their doors, couples stopped taking late-night strolls, and the city that once thrived on art and beauty trembled under the shadow of a monster whose motives remained inscrutable. The question that haunted everyone was simple, yet terrifying. Who could commit such acts, and why? What makes this case even more baffling is the span of time over which the murders occurred. From 1968 to 1985, a series of killings claimed at least 16 lives, with some sources claiming even more. The killer, elusive and methodical, left behind no fingerprints, no witnesses, only a trail of death that seemed to mock the very institutions sworn to protect the people. Authorities scrambled, theories clashed, and the media sensationalized every detail, turning a tragedy into a public spectacle. Yet the real story, what truly happened under the moonlit skies of Tuscany, remains a shadow, whispering through the olive groves and vineyards of Florence. For decades, suspects came and went. Some were innocent, caught in the frenzy of public panic, while others were enigmas who seemed to slip through the fingers of justice. Among the most infamous was Pacciani, a local farmer whose life became entwined with the mystery, accused, tried, acquitted, and retried, embodying the endless uncertainty surrounding these murders. Each courtroom battle brought new revelations and fresh confusions, yet the monster seemed untouched, lurking in the peripheries, always a step ahead of those who sought him. Tonight, as we dive deep into this chilling saga, we'll explore not just the crimes themselves, but the chilling psychology behind them. What drives a human being to such extreme violence? Is it lust, revenge, or a darker, more unfathomable compulsion? And as we peel back the layers of evidence, witness accounts, and police investigations, you'll see how fear, obsession, and the desperate search for justice intertwined in a story that has haunted Italy for decades. So prepare yourself for a journey into one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries of modern Italy. From the serene Tuscan landscapes to the dark, blood-stained nights that turned lovers into victims, this story is not for the faint-hearted. Make sure you stay until the end, because every revelation will leave you questioning not just the events, but the very nature of evil itself. And if you're ready to uncover the Monster of Florence, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what comes next will chill you to the bone. The story begins in 1968, on a quiet summer night near the town of Signa, just outside Florence. A young couple, innocent and in love, decided to escape the city's hustle, seeking solitude in a small car parked at a secluded spot. They believed themselves safe under the warm Tuscan sky, unaware that a predator was already watching, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What followed was the first glimpse of a horror that would terrorize Tuscany for nearly 2 decades. The couple's peaceful evening turned into a nightmare in seconds, and the methodical brutality of the attack shocked even the most hardened investigators. The murders were not just killings. They were ritualistic, deliberate, and cruelly symbolic. Each scene revealed chilling details, the way the victims were posed, the precise targeting, and the unnerving consistency across years of crimes. Detectives, examining the first crime, struggled to find a pattern, believing it might be an isolated incident, a tragic accident, or the work of a local lunatic. Yet as the bodies began to pile up, a horrifying truth became undeniable. This was no random act. It was the work of a mind that thrived on fear, control, and the ultimate violation of innocence. Word spread quickly throughout the region, as if the very hills whispered of a lurking terror. Parents warned their children, lovers abandoned romantic walks, and the once carefree nights of Tuscany became tense, shadowed by fear. Yet, despite the growing panic, the local authorities struggled to identify any credible leads. Each clue seemed deliberately planted to mislead investigators, each tip an intricate part of a puzzle designed to confuse and terrify. This deliberate evasion created a legend around the figure, a myth that both fascinated and horrified the public. The brutality of the first murders also revealed a disturbing psychological pattern. The attacks were committed against couples in foyers, intimate moments, suggesting a killer obsessed with love, sex, and violence. It was as if the predator could only assert power through the destruction of passion and trust, turning private moments into public horror. Experts who studied the case years later would describe the killer as meticulous, cunning, and terrifyingly patient, someone capable of waiting years, analyzing his victims and executing each crime with the precision of a surgeon. As law enforcement struggled, the media frenzy escalated. Newspapers ran sensational headlines drawing national attention to the sleepy Tuscan towns. The killer, whether aware or not, became an almost mythical figure in the Italian imagination. Dubbed the Monster of Florence, a name that encapsulated both fear and fascination. Families lived under constant anxiety, unsure if the next attack would strike their village, their street, or even their own loved ones. What had begun as a local tragedy evolved into a national obsession, intertwining grief, terror, and the relentless human desire for answers. By the time the second and third murders occurred, it became clear that Tuscany's serene landscapes would never be the same. Lovers' rendezvous, once private and joyful, were now fraught with fear. Every rustle of leaves or sudden shadow could signal danger. The Monster of Florence had transformed the very atmosphere of the region, instilling a persistent dread that lingered long after the first body was discovered. And for those investigating the case, each day brought new challenges, new suspects, and the haunting realization that the predator could strike again at any moment. As the years passed, the horrifying truth became painfully clear. These were not random acts of violence. Each murder followed a specific pattern, a cruel signature left by a predator who seemed to take pleasure in outsmarting investigators. Young couples were targeted late at night, secluded from prying eyes in cars parked along lonely roads or hidden in the Tuscan countryside. The attacks always involved extreme brutality, precise execution, and a level of planning that suggested deep obsession. Detectives began to realize that the Monster of Florence was not just a killer. He was a methodical strategist, always one step ahead, leaving behind a chilling trail of bodies and terrorized communities. The investigative team faced numerous challenges from the start. Clues were sparse, forensic technology was limited, and local witnesses often proved unreliable or too fearful to come forward. As more victims were discovered, investigators struggled to connect the dots, unsure whether the killings were the work of a single individual or a coordinated group. Each crime scene revealed shocking details: the victims' poses, the mutilations, the apparent symbolic nature of the attacks, painting a portrait of someone who derived sadistic satisfaction from control, fear, and chaos. With each murder, the monster's legend grew, spreading fear beyond the rural villages and into the heart of Florence itself. One of the most chilling aspects of the case was the monster's audacity. Despite the growing media attention, he continued to strike, seemingly unafraid of capture. Some believed the killer was intimately familiar with the local terrain, perhaps even knowing police methods or anticipating their investigative strategies. The realization that the monster could walk among the residents unnoticed and undetected shattered the sense of safety in the town surrounding Florence. Citizens lived in constant anxiety, questioning every stranger, every late-night noise, every shadowy figure lurking near their homes. The psychological impact of the crimes was almost as devastating as the physical violence itself. Authorities explored countless theories, ranging from deranged loners to organized criminal activity, even delving into the possibility of ritualistic or symbolic motives. Profilers suggested a killer with deep-seated resentment toward intimacy, perhaps fueled by personal trauma, jealousy, or sexual frustration. Some experts speculated that the monster sought to punish love itself, targeting couples in moments of private happiness. Others believed he was driven by an almost artistic obsession, meticulously planning each attack like a perverse performance, leaving behind a signature of fear and brutality that could only belong to a mind both brilliant and deeply disturbed. The media's portrayal of the monster added another layer of terror. Sensational headlines, lurid details, and speculative theories transformed the real-life horror into a public spectacle. Residents were no longer just worried about potential danger. They were living in a narrative of fear that infiltrated their everyday lives. Young couples avoided secluded spots, families stayed home after dark, and even local authorities began to feel the oppressive weight of public expectation. Every unanswered question, every unsolved murder only fueled the legend further. The monster had become more than a criminal. He had become a symbol of untouchable evil in the heart of Italy. Despite the fear, the investigators persevered. Forensic teams, detectives, and criminal psychologists worked tirelessly, examining every shred of evidence, revisiting old case files, and attempting to anticipate the monster's next move. Yet with each murder, the predator's cunning became more apparent, highlighting the terrifying intelligence and patience behind the acts. What was originally a series of shocking crimes had now evolved into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with the monster always seeming to vanish just when capture seemed inevitable. And as Tuscany's nights grew longer and quieter, one terrifying thought haunted everyone. The monster was still out there, watching, waiting, ready to strike again. As the years rolled on, the Monster of Florence became bolder, his crimes growing in frequency and cruelty. Each attack seemed to escalate the terror, leaving investigators and locals alike grappling with a sense of helplessness. No longer confined to isolated incidents, the killings began to reveal a chilling confidence. The monster appeared to relish in the fear he instilled, knowing that the mere rumor of his presence could paralyze entire communities. Families stopped visiting rural areas at night, couples abandoned secret hideaways, and Tuscany's once idyllic countryside became a theater of anxiety and dread. It was clear that whoever this killer was, he thrived in the shadows, blending seamlessly into the towns he haunted. Detectives quickly realized that a single profile could not easily explain the sophistication of the murders. Was the monster a solitary predator, or were accomplices involved? Local authorities combed through records, interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and analyzed minute details from each crime scene. Yet every clue led to frustrating dead ends. Forensic science of the time struggled to keep pace with the precision of the crimes. The killer's ability to evade detection, combined with a seeming mastery of local geography and human behavior, left investigators questioning whether they were facing an ordinary criminal or someone of terrifying intellect and meticulous planning. The first wave of suspects emerged, casting a shadow of suspicion over the entire community. Among them was Pacciani, a farmer with a troubled past whose eccentric behavior and proximity to several crime scenes drew intense scrutiny. Neighbors recalled odd occurrences and suspicious habits, feeding a growing narrative that he could be responsible. Yet despite the mounting suspicion, Concrete evidence remained elusive. Courtrooms filled with tense debates. The press sensationalized every development and the public's fear intensified. Pacciani became a symbol of uncertainty, an enigmatic figure caught between accusation and doubt, representing both the desperation of the authorities and the community's desperate need for closure. Psychologists studying the case suggested that the monster exhibited traits of an individual driven by obsession, compulsion, and a desire for control. The selection of victims, young couples in intimate moments, hinted at a twisted relationship with love and sexuality, possibly stemming from deep personal trauma or resentment. The killer's methodical approach, careful planning, and the deliberate leaving of symbolic signatures suggested not only a need to kill, but a need to assert dominance over fear itself. As theories multiplied, investigators felt both the weight of urgency and the frustration of a seemingly unsolvable puzzle, where each answer only raised further questions. Meanwhile, the media's relentless coverage added a layer of chaos to the investigation. Newspapers ran sensational stories painting the monster as almost supernatural, a faceless predator who could strike at any moment. Citizens lived under a dual reality, the beauty of Tuscany juxtaposed with an omnipresent terror. Local police were inundated with tips, false leads, and public outrage, while the monster continued to evade capture. This media frenzy contributed to a collective paranoia, where everyone became a suspect and every shadow could hide a murderer. The fear was no longer just about physical safety. It had seeped into the psyche of an entire region. By the mid-1970s, it was evident that this was no ordinary criminal case. The Monster of Florence had transformed from a series of isolated murders into a saga that gripped Italy's imagination, challenging law enforcement, the justice system, and the very notion of security. Every new attack was not just a tragedy but a statement, proof of the predator's power and cunning. Families continued to live in fear. Detectives worked tirelessly to uncover patterns, and the monster's legend grew darker with each passing year. The shadow of suspicion, the obsession with evidence, and the relentless terror became the new reality, leaving Florence trapped in a chilling dance with an invisible killer who seemed untouchable. By the mid-1970s, the Monster of Florence had become more than just a criminal. He was a phantom haunting the very imagination of Tuscany. The murders had increased in frequency and audacity, with each attack more brazen than the last. Couples parked in remote areas thinking themselves safe from prying eyes became unsuspecting victims of a methodical killer who struck without warning. News of the attack spread rapidly, turning once quiet villages into zones of fear. Parents forbade their children from venturing out after dark. Lovers avoided secluded spots, and the serene Italian countryside now echoed with whispers of dread. It was as if the monster had turned everyday life into a high-stakes game of terror. Authorities attempted their first arrests, fueled by leads and growing public pressure, but each effort ended in frustration. Suspicion fell on multiple individuals, from eccentric locals to known criminals. But the lack of concrete evidence meant that suspects were released, often to public outrage. One arrest in particular sparked media frenzy, as newspapers portrayed the accused as the monster incarnate, creating a wave of hysteria across Florence. Yet the acquittal that followed left both the police and the public grappling with despair. The monster remained at large, a silent predator whose cunning ensured that justice always seemed just out of reach. The killer's ability to evade capture began to suggest a deep familiarity with law enforcement tactics. Experts speculated that he may have studied police methods, or even possessed an intimate knowledge of the rural terrain that allowed him to vanish without a trace. Each investigation that seemed promising ended in frustration, reinforcing the myth of an untouchable predator. The frustration, however, only fueled determination within the investigative teams, who tirelessly combed through old files, re-examined evidence, and tried to anticipate the monster's next move. The tension was unbearable. Every night brought the terrifying possibility that another young couple might fall victim to the same horrifying fate. During this period, the media's sensational reporting intensified the fear. Headlines screamed of a faceless killer, of bodies discovered in vineyards, of communities gripped by panic. The monster had become a legend, a symbol of ultimate evil lurking just beneath the surface of normal life. Ordinary citizens became amateur detectives, scrutinizing strangers and mistrusting neighbors. Tuscany's picturesque villages, once defined by art, culture, and romance, were now stages for anxiety, paranoia, and suspense. The monster had transformed the collective psyche, turning daily life into a precarious balance between normalcy and terror. Despite the failures in arrests, investigators did uncover a disturbing pattern. Each crime scene bore specific hallmarks that suggested ritualistic elements and meticulous planning. The targeting of couples in intimate moments, the use of specific weapons, and the careful disposal of bodies hinted at a twisted, controlling intelligence. Criminal profilers suggested the monster was not merely a killer, but a man with a compulsion to dominate, to instill fear, and to leave behind evidence that taunted the authorities. Every detail, no matter how minor, became a clue, and yet the puzzle remained maddeningly unsolvable, leaving detectives frustrated and the public terrified. By the late 1970s, it became clear that the Monster of Florence would not be captured quickly. His crimes had evolved into a decades-long nightmare, blending methodical planning with unpredictable cruelty. Families continued to live in fear. Investigators faced endless dead ends, and the killer's legend grew darker with each passing year. The sense of invincibility surrounding him created a chilling reality. Tuscany was trapped in a cycle of terror, where every quiet night carried the shadow of unimaginable violence. And in the hearts of the people, a haunting question lingered. Who was this monster, and could anyone ever stop him? As the 1980s dawned, the Monster of Florence showed no signs of slowing, and his crimes became even more brazen, leaving the nation gripped by fear. Investigators faced mounting pressure as the bodies continued to appear, each crime scene echoing the chilling precision of previous attacks. Tuscany's countryside, once a symbol of idyllic beauty, had become a stage for horror, where love and intimacy were no longer safe. Couples parked in quiet spots to steal private moments now faced a predator who seemed to anticipate their every move. A shadow blending seamlessly into the rolling hills, always unseen, always waiting. The monster's reign of terror had stretched over decades, and the people of Florence began to wonder if he would ever be caught. During this decade, law enforcement increasingly relied on the emerging field of forensic science, hoping that advancements could finally corner the elusive killer. Investigators meticulously examined fibers, hair samples, and trace evidence at crime scenes, yet the monster's meticulous planning often rendered these efforts fruitless. Every potential lead seemed to dissolve into uncertainty, leaving detectives frustrated and desperate. The killer's cunning had reached a point where even scientific progress seemed insufficient, and the long shadows of doubt and suspicion weighed heavily over the region. With each attack, the public's fear intensified and the police's desperation grew. The case also began attracting international attention. Journalists and criminologists from around the world flocked to Florence, drawn by the eerie combination of methodical murders and decades-long impunity. The monster's legend spread beyond Italy, capturing imaginations and chilling readers across continents. Books, documentaries, and articles speculated on the identity and psychology of the killer, offering theories ranging from a single disturbed individual to a secretive group orchestrating the murders. The world watched as Italy grappled with a crime that seemed almost supernatural in its evasion of justice, and the sense of fascination mingled with horror as the story continued to unfold. Despite international scrutiny, arrests continued to fail. The most infamous suspect, Pacciani, remained a central figure in the investigation. Tried and acquitted multiple times, only to have further allegations cast him back into suspicion. The legal system struggled under the weight of public expectation, media attention, and the complexity of evidence spanning decades. Families of victims grew frustrated with the slow pace of justice, while law enforcement grappled with the overwhelming task of piecing together a puzzle designed to frustrate them. The monster seemed untouchable, his crimes leaving a trail of despair, confusion, and relentless fear. The monster's psychological profile became increasingly refined as experts studied the patterns. Each murder revealed a mix of obsessive compulsion, sexual fixation, and sadistic control. His attacks were never random. They followed a deliberate selection of victims, specific locations, and precise execution that spoke of both planning and deep-seated pathology. Criminal psychologists debated the motivations behind the crimes, analyzing the symbolic nature of mutilations and the predator's need to dominate and terrorize. Yet even with expert insight, understanding the monster's mind proved elusive, and the true nature of his evil remained shrouded in darkness. By the mid-1980s, the case had become a national obsession, blending horror, suspense, and tragedy into a story that gripped Italy and the world. The Monster of Florence had transformed from a criminal into a symbol, a reminder of the fragility of safety and the presence of unimaginable evil. Communities remained on edge, investigators labored tirelessly, and the press chronicled every development with breathless intensity. The landscape of Tuscany itself, once a place of romance and art, had been forever altered by fear, leaving the people haunted by the knowledge that a methodical, intelligent, and merciless predator was walking among them. And even after decades of investigation, one terrifying truth remained. The monster was still out there, watching, waiting, ready to strike again. By the late 1980s, the Monster of Florence case had reached a fever pitch. The relentless murders spanning over 2 decades had transformed from local terror into a national obsession. Investigators and prosecutors faced immense pressure to identify the killer, and all eyes turned to Pacciani, a farmer whose proximity to several crime scenes and peculiar behavior had made him a prime suspect. The trials were not just legal proceedings. They were a public spectacle with media coverage reaching a frenzied intensity. Citizens followed every courtroom development, desperate for answers, hoping that justice might finally catch up to the elusive predator. Pacciani's first trial exposed the complexity and controversy of the case. Prosecutors painted him as the monster, linking him to evidence that, while compelling in theory, often relied on circumstantial connections. Witness testimonies were conflicting. Forensic evidence was inconsistent, and the defense argued relentlessly that Pacciani was being scapegoated. The courtroom became a battlefield of accusations and denials, with each side presenting a narrative that alternately horrified and fascinated the public. The trial showcased not only the challenges of prosecuting such a meticulous killer, but also the difficulty of separating myth from fact in a case already steeped in legend. Despite the compelling narrative, Pacciani was initially acquitted, leaving families and the public frustrated and outraged. Many believed that justice had failed, while others questioned whether anyone could ever be convicted in a case so convoluted and tainted by decades of fear, speculation, and sensationalism. The acquittal did not signal the end of the investigation. Rather, it intensified scrutiny, with authorities revisiting old evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, and re-examining every detail for clues that might have been overlooked. The monster remained at large, and Tuscany's nights continued to echo with fear, uncertainty, and the lingering question of whether the predator would strike again. The trials also exposed deep flaws in the investigative process. Conflicting reports, mismanaged evidence, and procedural errors complicated an already complex case. Forensic science had advanced, yet it still struggled to definitively link Pacciani or anyone else to the crimes. The legal system grappled with the immense challenge of balancing public expectation, evidentiary standards, and the presumption of innocence. Every failed prosecution fed the monster's legend, reinforcing the perception that he was untouchable, always one step ahead, and capable of eluding justice despite the tireless efforts of authorities. Meanwhile, the monster's victims and their families endured decades of grief, compounded by frustration and anger. The prolonged trials, media frenzy, and repeated failures to convict a suspect left emotional scars that extended far beyond the crime scenes. Communities that had once been tight-knit now lived in suspicion, mistrust, and constant anxiety. Couples feared to be alone. Families feared for their children, and Tuscany's romantic landscapes were forever tinged with horror. The monster had not only killed innocents but had instilled a lasting sense of vulnerability in everyone who lived under his shadow. Ultimately, Pacciani would be convicted in a retrial years later, but controversy and doubt lingered. Many questioned whether he acted alone or at all, while others argued that decades of mismanagement, flawed investigations, and media sensationalism had compromised the pursuit of justice. The case became a symbol of the difficulties inherent in prosecuting a cunning, meticulous criminal, and the Monster of Florence continued to haunt the public imagination. Even after decades of legal battles, murders, and trials, one chilling truth remained: the fear, the mystery, and the shadow of the monster would never be fully eradicated. By the 1990s, forensic science had advanced significantly, offering a glimmer of hope in a case that had confounded authorities for decades. Investigators turned to DNA analysis, hoping to finally identify the Monster of Florence with scientific certainty. Hairs, fibers, and other biological evidence collected from decades-old crime scenes were carefully examined in laboratories across Italy. These advances brought renewed optimism to law enforcement. Yet they also revealed the complexity of the case. Much of the evidence was degraded, contaminated, or inconclusive, reflecting the challenges of investigating crimes that had spanned so many years. Despite these obstacles, the new techniques allowed the monster's elusive presence to be traced with a precision previously impossible, reigniting public attention and curiosity about the decades-old horrors. With forensic breakthroughs came renewed speculation about the killer's network. Investigators began exploring the possibility that Pacciani did not act alone, raising chilling questions about accomplices or a small group operating with shared motives. This theory gained traction when certain patterns, weapons, and methods suggested coordination rather than the work of a solitary individual. The notion that multiple people could have collaborated to commit such heinous crimes sent shockwaves through the community, deepening the terror. Families who had thought the nightmare might be over realized that the darkness may have been more pervasive, more organized than anyone had imagined. As the investigation progressed, old suspects were revisited, witnesses re-interviewed, and theories re-evaluated. The Italian authorities faced the immense challenge of connecting decades-old evidence to living suspects while navigating legal constraints and public scrutiny. Analysts and criminologists debated the monster's motives, proposing complex psychological profiles that suggested obsession, ritualistic tendencies, and an insatiable desire for control. Was the monster a solitary genius, a deranged loner, or part of a clandestine group whose collective cruelty had evaded justice for decades? Each possibility carried its own horror, and each revealed the extent to which fear had seeped into the fabric of Florence's society. Media coverage intensified once more, this time fueled by the promise of scientific breakthroughs. Newspapers ran stories about DNA tests, potential accomplices, and the haunting implications of unsolved murders spanning decades. International audiences followed the case with morbid fascination, drawn to the blend of methodical crime, psychological intrigue, and decades-long mystery. The Monster of Florence had become a global symbol of terror, a case study in obsession, ingenuity, and the terrifying endurance of evil. Even after years of trials and investigation, the world remained captivated, desperate for closure yet horrified by the possibility that complete answers might never come. In addition to technical advances, new witness testimonies shed light on previously overlooked details. Villagers recalled strange movements at night, unfamiliar visitors to remote areas, and cryptic conversations that had been dismissed at the time. While many accounts were anecdotal, some suggested patterns that reinforced the theory of accomplices. Investigators painstakingly cross-referenced these testimonies with forensic evidence, trying to construct a timeline and map of the monster's activity. Yet even as clues emerged, the monster's cunning remained apparent. The killings had been executed with precision, and every step taken by the authorities seemed anticipated and countered by an intelligence both meticulous and calculating. By the end of the decade, the case had evolved into a complex web of forensic science, criminal psychology, and unresolved suspicion. While DNA breakthroughs offered hope, they also raised new questions about accountability and the true extent of the monster's network. Some believed justice had been served partially with convictions, while others argued that the real perpetrators, or co-conspirators, might never be identified. The shadow of the monster lingered, haunting not only the streets and vineyards of Tuscany but also the minds of investigators, victims' families, and the global audience captivated by the story. Decades of terror, intrigue, and unanswered questions had created a chilling narrative that would continue to mesmerize and horrify for generations. By the early 2000s, the Monster of Florence case had become more than just a criminal investigation. It was a cultural phenomenon. Decades of unsolved murders, controversial trials, and public panic had transformed the story into a legend that haunted Italy and captivated audiences worldwide. Documentaries, books, and international news outlets dissected every detail, re-examining evidence and scrutinizing suspects old and new. Yet despite the intense attention, the core question remained unanswered. Who had committed these heinous crimes, and had all responsible parties truly been brought to justice? Each new article or documentary reignited fear and fascination, blending fact with speculation in ways that made the monster seem both real and almost mythical. Investigators faced immense frustration as new leads often went cold. With the passage of time, memories faded, witnesses became unavailable, and forensic evidence deteriorated. Some cases, once believed to be conclusively solved, were reopened due to new interpretations of evidence or advances in forensic science. DNA analysis, while revolutionary, did not always provide definitive answers, leaving prosecutors with tantalizing clues but no absolute proof. This liminal state, where some aspects seemed solvable while others remained shrouded in mystery, maintained the monster's aura of invincibility and perpetuated public anxiety. Media coverage played a dual role in this period. On one hand, it kept the public informed and put pressure on authorities to continue pursuing justice. On the other hand, sensationalized reporting often blurred the lines between evidence-based conclusions and speculation. Newspapers and television programs frequently highlighted controversial aspects of the case, such as the possibility of multiple accomplices, alleged corruption within the investigative system, and lingering doubts about the convictions of Pacciani and others. The media's relentless scrutiny created a climate of suspicion, where every new theory seemed plausible, and every unresolved question heightened fear and intrigue. Public debate intensified around the possibility of a broader network behind the murders. Some criminologists argued that the monster might have acted alone, while others suggested a small group of individuals coordinated attacks over decades. Villagers and local residents reported strange occurrences in remote areas, mysterious visitors, and unusual patterns that hinted at unseen orchestration. Each revelation, whether anecdotal or corroborated, fed the narrative of a predator who had evaded justice through meticulous planning. intimate knowledge of the land, and an uncanny ability to anticipate law enforcement. This uncertainty kept both investigators and the public on edge, haunted by the sense that the full story had yet to be uncovered. During this period, legal debates also emerged concerning past convictions. The courts examined whether procedural errors, flawed forensic methods, or unreliable witness testimony had influenced earlier outcomes. Appeals and retrials dragged on, creating tension for victims' families who sought closure, for investigators who had devoted their lives to solving the case, and for the public who had been captivated by the story for decades. While some saw these legal reviews as hope for justice, others feared that bureaucracy and human error might forever cloud the truth, leaving the monster's identity partially or entirely unknown. By the mid-2000s, the Monster of Florence had evolved into a symbol of unsolved evil, a cautionary tale of obsession, cunning, and the limitations of justice. The murders, trials, and controversies created a narrative where fear, myth, and reality intertwined, leaving communities and investigators alike questioning whether they would ever understand the full extent of the crimes. Even decades after the first attack, the monster's shadow lingered, shaping cultural memory, haunting the hills of Tuscany, and serving as a chilling reminder that evil can persist, evolve, and elude capture. And as stories circulated, the public could not help but wonder, how many secrets had the monster taken to his grave? And how much of the truth would remain hidden forever? As the case entered the 2010s, the Monster of Florence remained an enigma. Though decades had passed since the first brutal killings, the shadow of terror still lingered over Tuscany. Investigators continued to review old files, examine cold evidence, and follow new leads suggested by forensic advancements. Yet each attempt seemed to confront the same frustrating reality. The monster had been methodical, intelligent, and elusive, leaving behind a trail of questions that outnumbered answers. The killer had left a psychological footprint as indelible as the physical scars he inflicted, and the hunt for justice became as much about understanding human evil as it was about solving specific crimes. The focus shifted toward exploring whether the crimes were the work of one man or a coordinated group. Some criminologists argued that Pacciani might have been part of a wider circle, supported by accomplices who helped execute the killings with precision. Others maintained that the pattern could be explained by a single meticulous individual with deep local knowledge. Each theory carried its own chilling implications. If accomplices existed, it meant that multiple individuals had lived for years with the knowledge of unspeakable crimes, their presence woven into the daily life of the region. The notion of complicity within a community intensified the horror, suggesting that the monster's evil might extend beyond the confines of a single mind. Even with modern forensic tools, the Monster of Florence continued to evade definitive identification. DNA evidence, once hailed as a potential breakthrough, often yielded inconclusive or contaminated results. Investigators found themselves in a delicate balance, applying new technology to decades-old evidence while navigating legal complexities that limited the ability to prosecute. Families of the victims, still seeking closure, had to contend with a judicial system strained by history, media attention, and the enduring mythology of the case. The combination of scientific advancement and procedural limitations created an unsettling reality. While much was known about the monster's methods and psychological profile, the full truth of his identity remained elusive. The cultural impact of the case reached far beyond Italy. Books, films, and documentaries dissected every murder, trial, and theory, turning the Monster of Florence into a global symbol of unresolved horror. Audiences worldwide were captivated by the mix of meticulous crime, psychological intrigue, and decades-long evasion of justice. For many, the story highlighted both the brilliance and the terror of a criminal mind that could operate in secret for years, eluding not only law enforcement but the collective understanding of morality and justice. The monster had transcended individual crimes to become a narrative of enduring fear and fascination. Public interest in the case also rekindled ethical debates about media sensationalism, investigative mistakes, and the social consequences of prolonged uncertainty. Was Pacciani wrongfully accused? Were potential accomplices ignored? Could justice ever truly be served when decades of fear, myth, and legend had intertwined with reality? These questions haunted not only legal professionals but the public imagination, reinforcing the notion that the Monster of Florence was as much a psychological and cultural phenomenon as he was a criminal. The case became a mirror reflecting the fragility of trust, the persistence of fear, and the challenges inherent in understanding human evil. Even today, the Monster of Florence maintains a chilling presence. The vineyards, olive groves, and rolling hills of Tuscany are no longer just beautiful. They are haunted by memory. Locals recall the whispers of past crimes, the warnings to young couples, and the unshakable fear that once gripped the region. The legend endures, a reminder of a predator who combined cunning, patience, and cruelty over decades. For investigators, families, and historians, the monster's shadow lingers, proof that some evils can evade justice, leaving only questions, speculation, and an enduring sense of dread. The story is unfinished, a chilling narrative that continues to captivate, terrify, and mystify the world. Even after decades of investigation, trials, and forensic breakthroughs, the Monster of Florence remains one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in modern criminal history. While some believe that Pacciani and alleged accomplices were responsible for the killings, others argue that the true identity of the monster may never be known. The pattern, precision, and audacity of the murders suggest a criminal mind that was meticulous, calculating, and terrifyingly intelligent. Each murder, each crime scene, each piece of evidence tells a story of obsession, compulsion, and a darkness that cannot be easily explained or rationalized. The case's enduring fascination lies not only in the horror of the murders, but also in the psychological complexity behind them. Profilers suggest that the monster derived satisfaction from fear itself, targeting young couples in intimate, vulnerable moments to assert control and dominance. His actions created a climate of terror, extending far beyond the immediate victims to impact entire communities. Tuscany, a region once synonymous with romance and beauty, became a place where love and trust were shadowed by suspicion and dread. The monster's legacy is one of psychological manipulation as much as physical violence, leaving a lasting imprint on the collective memory of the region. Modern forensic techniques have offered tantalizing clues, yet no definitive closure has been achieved. DNA analysis, once heralded as the key to solving the case, has only partially illuminated the monster's activities. Some evidence remains inconclusive, while other leads have been lost to time. As a result, the monster's identity continues to provoke debate among investigators, criminologists, and the public. The possibility that the true scope of the crimes might never be fully uncovered adds an extra layer of unease, reinforcing the chilling idea that evil can persist and evade capture, even under intense scrutiny. The Monster of Florence has also left a significant cultural legacy. Books, films, documentaries, and global media coverage have transformed the case into a cautionary tale of obsession, fear, and the limits of justice. The story captivates because it combines meticulous criminal methodology with psychological horror and decades of uncertainty. It is a narrative that transcends time and geography, illustrating the profound impact that a single, cunning, and ruthless individual, or group, can have on society. The monster has become more than a criminal. He is a symbol of enduring fear and the haunting power of unsolved evil. For the families of the victims, the emotional scars remain as raw as ever. The prolonged uncertainty, coupled with repeated trials, media speculation, and unrelenting public attention, has magnified their grief. Many continue to seek answers, closure, and justice, while grappling with the reality that some mysteries may never be fully resolved. The monster's ability to evade detection for decades underscores a painful truth. Evil can be patient, intelligent, and elusive, leaving behind not just victims but a legacy of fear and unanswered questions. As we reflect on the Monster of Florence, one chilling realization stands out. The story is not just about crimes committed, but about the fragility of human safety, the persistence of evil, and the obsession that drives both criminals and those who pursue them. While decades of investigation, forensic science, and legal proceedings have brought some clarity, the core mystery endures, leaving Tuscany and the world with an unresolved nightmare. If there is one lesson to take away, it is that evil can hide in plain sight, and some shadows may never be fully illuminated. The Monster of Florence is more than a series of murders. It is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist within humanity. Even now, the hills, vineyards, and olive groves of Tuscany carry whispers of the past, echoing the terror that gripped lovers, families, and investigators for decades. The case may be decades old, but its lessons and fears remain timeless. If you were captivated by this chilling journey through one of Italy's darkest mysteries, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because we will continue to explore the world's most terrifying true crimes and unsolved horrors. Every case has secrets waiting to be uncovered, and the next story may be even closer to home than you think.